48%. Let's go up a little bit more. Yeah, and that's pretty good. And like even just with this neg here, it's doing quite a bit. And we've also blocked out that window to kind of get rid of some of the wrap there even. But let's turn this back on. And let's just get a little bit of fill. Yeah, and like, you know, again, like, oh, it's really low resolution. Sorry. But, you know, it's kind of building up the look. And I always take it in stages when I'm kind of processing, like where you're going to be putting your camera. These are all things you want to think about when you're kind of placing your lights. And again, we have a little fill here just to kind of help, you know, wrap around the key side right here. And again, like, you know, a big thing people would do is like have a backlight or have some type of hair light to kind of help get separation. But just inherently, we're shooting into the L of the room. So we have a good key light coming from here. Normally we use light from outside, but we have this supplementing it, kind of acting like an additional window. And then we have these windows in the back kind of rimming him. And you know, we can come in, we can add a little bit more of a hair light, things like that. But just even this window right here, if I stand right here, you can kind of see the shape. You know, let's get that small flag, and let's just get it right here to see how much we can shape it.
So Keenan, when you're walking into a room like this, and maybe you don't have a lot of time, or maybe you don't have a lot of hands to help you with in a situation like this, why would using things like neg or things like a light tools be more beneficial to a DP in this situation?
The thing with light tools is I feel like it's a standard for me now. It's just it just helps control the light. Like you're gonna lose a bit of output from it, but it just helps keep things in line, especially when you're shooting anything with high reflective windows or anything. Just having the right angle and the light tools will get rid of showing your source and the reflection and things like that. So it's usually things like light tools are good for saving time on set. And again, you want to be as prepared as you can, just because it's always a race against the clock, and you kind of want to have a plan in to be able to create the image you want, but then also control it as much and have things be as fast as they can be.
And so when you're building a world like this and you're using various nags to flag off this light here, why flag these off from the sides as opposed to just leaving the bare light bouncing into?
Because the other thing is you got to be careful about is just the density of light in the room. The ambience or the base light of the room is very important, because you can have your fixtures and you can have a beautiful key light on someone, but if there isn't a base amount of light in the room, and again, sometimes you want that look, but a lot of the time you're going to be dealing with outside factors like windows and different things, so you're balancing to that, so you're going to lose just the base level of light. So it's good to have for ambience, just you want to have ambience you can control, but you also don't want all the spill of this to kind of pop up and brighten up parts of the image that you don't want to be bright. And again, this is white ceiling, right? So you got to be careful of in locations with bright lights bouncing up and then kind of contaminating what you're shooting or your image.
And I think the important part of this setup too is we don't have a lot of lights set up. Most of this setup is done with our key light, and then we have another light just to accent it. So it's not like we need 3 or 4 lights in this setup to make something like this happen. With the light that you're using as the key, if you were to replace that light and put it outside, how would that look differ than if it was inside for people?
I guess the thing is, it's always I guess it's it's a loaded question. But I guess the main thing is you'll be able to get the proper distance. There's there's this balance you want to have with softness and intensity of having your light a certain distance away. The good thing about windows is it kind of shapes naturally to the room. So if you have a source coming from outside, the window is the cutter, but that can also be a double-edged sword when you're shooting in a room with small windows, right? So it's there's also places and times here we have the space, but again having a brighter light outside, it's a consistent light that then you can control. Do you know what I mean? And it's again, I like having the lights outside more so for space in the set, to basically be able to think about where to put camera and being able to move the camera.
So if you were to block around on this scene, the limitations that you're saying is because this light is inside, because we're on the second story of something.
Yeah.
If this was outside, we'd have more room to set up dolly tracks or a jib or crane or something.
Even just switching setups, it's just quicker to have smaller fixtures inside. And again, there's times where you need to have those fixtures inside, but even like things that I do is like, you know, classic, like just a bounce light, like say if you're working in a space with a small window, what I like to do is just put a piece of whiteboard above the window, usually get a couple flags, block it off, and then kind of bouncing light into that, just to have like a natural ambient light that kind of comes in. Because sometimes when, you know, the problem you can have with having fixtures too close and you don't have that space to kind of get a good distance, what you'll get is you'll get like, you know, like, I guess like very harsh light that doesn't really spread through the room nicely. So it's nice if you need to like have more ambience in the room, just to kind of have like a bounce or something above to kind of accent it. It could be a light mat, it could be something like that, but just to kind of add the ambience into it.
So you don't want it to feel too sourcey. And I think that's where we were talking about before, is
Yeah.
like our source is coming from this side of the room.
Yeah.
Later in the day, you know, 5 o'clock, this sun's gonna move around. If we were shooting a commercial for the next 6 hours, you know, why is it important to kind of set this look ahead of time so that you can do a full day commercial and be able to have that same consistency?
I think your best friend's control. Like you can see the sun coming out right now. You know, it changes the look of everything, and you know, I think the key thing is like wanting to have control of the scene for a long time, and like I think the hardest thing for people to do is it's not really lighting a nice looking scene. If you want to have a nice looking shot, that's not the most difficult thing to do. But I think the thing that really sets you apart from other people is being able to be consistent. You know what I mean? And like being prepared for the sun moving across the scene. That's an important thing, and like that's really the key. Is like being able to control things and keep consistent.
Perfect.
Or that consistency.
Perfect. Okay, let's open it up to questions from the audience. When you're thinking about controlling lights, what questions does people have for Keenan? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious about this light you're using to kind of wrap the key.
Yeah.
Is there a reason that you and your team elected to use a light panel that might be a much smaller size than the 8x that you're using as the initial key?
Yeah, this is just a fill light. This is just to kind of fill in, you know, like the parts on this side of the face. It's just to kind of wrap around, get some extra texture. You know what I mean? Like this is doing the majority of the work. Like I would love to get that light a little bit further here, but we're kind of limited by space. But I'm just using this because it's a small source and it just gives an extra little kick just to kind of wrap around and get a little bit more detail.
So let's say you're doing the scene and you don't have access to put anything else outside. What would in terms of consistency, what would change for you to make sure that this looks the same all day, even when the sun doesn't come?
That's like the tricky thing is, you know, it's if you don't have access to outside, I think it's like seeing where the sun's going to be at certain times of the day. Like again, like if you're on the shadow side of a building and you know you're facing north, you don't really have to worry about that sun creeping in. Do you know what I mean? So it's thinking about things like that, and you know sometimes you can't really do anything about it, and that's when you know you start like again like when I was talking about the ambience, like the kick above the window. That's when you start thinking about things like that, the way you can kind of get some control of it. And you know, there's also things like shears and things like that to kind of, but again, it's a tricky thing. Like, you know, I think you just have to have a plan for when things change. You kind of have to just be balanced for both. But again, it's not ideal.
You work backwards then, like okay, well, that's gonna be most of my day. That kind of lower light in those windows, so that's what I like build from.
You try to, but I think you just got to be prepared for both. Like you want to be. You want to be kind of ready for the lowest and the highest, like again, like the stop difference between the sun being out and low. So you just kind of have to be ready and like, you know, again, and just like a big thing when the sun does come out is like the density of the light in the room. So like having a balance for the density of the light. But again, it's just being aware and just like trying to match your settings and try to keep that density consistent, which is like pretty hard. And I think it's just when you don't have control, it's like also limiting the types of shots. Like, because the tighter you get, it's easier to control what's around it, right? So like, you know, usually in settings where this light's good, I usually try to focus on the largest, widest frame. And when the light is the way I like it, I then move in once, because then I have more control over a smaller image than I do of like the full scene, you know?
I think the importance of the location scout is making
Yeah,
sure that
exactly.
you have time to do that is really like the key. I mean, we planned this shoot based on the sun hopefully being out today of you going first. So I think that speaks to location scouting as importance.
Yeah, so like question, I saw you guys have like the frost on the windows and everything going with that. You have through the diffusion and everything.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed looking at the image is it has a cooler tonality with this frost. It's adding
Yeah.
like a 6,600 light realm. Do you guys ever think about adding more? Like, do you look at it and try to figure out what kind of gels to put on? Even these aperture lights are kind of a little bit warmer.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about when you walk into a space thinking about that? I know it's to taste usually for all of us, but
I think it's to taste and like what the idea you're trying to convey in the scene. Like again, like the frost was here when I came here. You know, the frost is like again, like what I was talking about. Again, there's natural color tint to the frost, and that's something we don't have control. So what we did is we like again, it was a lot warmer when the sun's out. So we have different settings. We're not live adjusting to them right now, but it's just being prepared for those things. And like again, like it's to what your taste is. You
So
know?
if you were, let's say you were trying to get like a golden hour look in this room,
Yeah.
would that be achievable given the tools we have right now? Or would the outside make that hard to do and achieve?
The frosted windows make it easier. Like again, like what we were gonna do with this CS15 here is we were gonna have a spotlight mount on it, and just to kind of get like an extra like sun-kissed spot in the background. Let's turn that on and see if we can get a hit from it. Again, we have like a medium. No, we have a wide beam on that. Medium beam, yeah. So like, you can always add to it and like build up your key and build up the contrast, and then you add those hot spots to kind of add points of interest and things like that. But it's really like a balance of time and preference, and you know, sometimes. Yeah, I'm warming up a bit. What's the color temperature of it right now?
5,000.
5,000. It's warming up a little bit more. Do like 4,800.
are you guys using a leak on that, or is that a Fresnel?
That's just a reflector.
That's a reflector.
Yeah, it's a medium reflector beam on that one right now. But again, we wanted to have a spotlight and have a harder mount. But again, like you can always add to it and like, you know, again, like I would love to bring down some of the contrast on this, have it more white walls time. So like there's lots of things you can do with it. And again, like I think it's just having your vision of what you want to convey and seeing the space that you're scouting and being like, how can I achieve this? And like, what are the things I have to think about building the frame?
Any other questions for Keenan? Awesome. All right, well, let's give Keenan a round of applause. Thank you.